Welcome back to Not How Life Works. In this installment, we'll follow General Salim and the crew of the USS Providence as they navigate a high-stakes scenario involving a terrorist threat. This episode picks up where we left off, with the first chapter available in the description below should you wish to revisit the story's beginning. As always, we encourage you to share your insights, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this series with others. Look out for the next chapter in the following weeks, and without further ado, we hope you'll enjoy this original work. Chapter 2: A General's Gambit. General Salim, a figure of formidable presence and military acumen, stood at the helm of the operations room aboard the USS Providence, an aircraft carrier stationed in the volatile waters of the Red Sea. His robust physique, a reflection of a life filled with both indulgence and dedication, appeared somewhat incongruous amidst the modern technology and organized efficiency that enveloped him. The uniform clung tightly to his muscular frame, showcasing the numerous badges and medals that adorned it. The executive officer of the Providence, Commander Jensen, was silent beside him. "Do you really think they have the capability, sir?" Jensen asked in a tone that conveyed both skepticism and apprehension. If it weren't even remotely possible, Salim considered, they wouldn't be here. He scoffed. These clowns couldn't excite a magnet if they tried. Cascade failure, my ass. There was something about his answer that just didn't quite hit the mark, and a quick glance at Jensen confirmed that his concern hadn't faded. "If they're bluffing, we breathe easy and maybe get a laugh out of it. If they're not, well..." His voice waned, allowing the unspoken repercussions to hang heavy in the air. "The tech is there, theoretically," Jensen said quietly. "Sir, we've witnessed tremendous advances in EMP technology. If they've been able to harness it to that level..." Salim interrupted him with a dismissive scoff, his voice filled with a sense of authority and resistance. "Theoretically, Jensen, my grandmother could pilot this carrier." A seemingly innocuous blip on their radar, the vessel in question had suddenly become the focus of a possible international catastrophe. Passengers from various nations held captive, he pondered, imagining the chaotic diplomatic consequences that would unfold if he were to strike first. He mulled over the logistics of the threat, attempting to reconcile the technical feasibility with their known capabilities. He deduced that in order to produce an EMP of such magnitude, one would require a setup with an energy output comparable to that of a small nuclear reactor. Capacitors big enough to store that kind of charge would be massive, not to mention the cooling systems to prevent overheating. Where the hell would they get the resources for that? A rich prince, a rogue politician, someone with deep pockets. But even then, the logistics of assembling and maintaining such a device on a ship, it's not just about having the funds. It's about having the expertise, the secrecy. If they've managed to cram all that equipment on board, the sheer weight would be immense. Activating such a device, would the ship even withstand the force? As the connection line sprung to life, the intentional coldness of the terrorist leader's voice pierced through, heightening the feeling of dread in the operations room. "General Salim, we eagerly anticipate your decision," the voice taunted, each word dripping with sarcasm. "Perhaps you underestimate our capabilities. Let me paint a picture for you. A city of silence, 4 million lives plunged into darkness, 12,000 hospital beds gone dark, over 1 million students without schools, 2,000 homes without a heartbeat. Rescue efforts come to a standstill as first responders are overwhelmed by the screams of the victims. Communication networks collapse, isolating everyone. Transportation halts. Every train, car and bus immobilized. Water supply ceases without pumps to propel it. Air traffic control gone dark. Grounding flights, stranding thousands. Food supply chains disrupted. The leader's voice concluded with terrifying finality. "The choice is yours, General." The line went dead, and the control room once again sank into an oppressive silence. Salim's gaze turned to the monitor showing the latest developments, where the tension of the Red Sea standoff had already captured global attention. In a disturbing juxtaposition, the screen presented images of his ship, the USS Providence, and the terrorists' vessel, with headlines emphasizing the hostage situation, a group of tourists who had been participating in diving excursions when their vessel was seized. He went on to envision how they could have loaded all that equipment onto that minuscule ship in such a brief period of time. His attention went from the news screen back to the tactical monitor. The pieces didn't fit, and this incongruity fueled his skepticism. Pressing the comms button with a determined thrust, Salim, imbued with cynicism, replied, "Have you been moonlighting as a scriptwriter, or is it the ketamine speaking? Because, my friend, I find myself pondering the logistics. How one converts a leisure vessel into a floating tech marvel without drawing attention." With all eyes on him, a tense mood had descended on the operations room. Nevertheless, his laughter burst forth. "You think you are capable of altering anything from that tiny little tin can of yours. Quite the ambitious claim, targeting a city thousands of miles away." "In the spirit of transparency," he continued, "I'm inclined to believe we're dealing more with bluster than actual firepower. But rest assured, we're taking every precaution. After all, we wouldn't want to overreact to what might very well be an elaborate ruse. This is your final warning. Stand down, or you will be fired upon." With the last press of the button, Salim terminated the communication. He had reservations about their ability to comprehend his words. However, he reasoned that given their capacity to construct this kind of equipment, they must have a high degree of English comprehension. The crew waited, breaths held, for a response. A sign, anything. Minutes seemed to drag on endlessly as Salim's once unwavering confidence gave way to a creeping sense of unease. All of a sudden, the USS Providence was swallowed by darkness. Sparks and the scent of burning circuits filled the command deck as the ship's systems failed one after another, plunging the crew into chaos. "Status report now." Salim raised his angry voice over the din. Officers rushed about him, while Jensen, as confused but unflappable, joined in, issuing commands and attempting to galvanize the crew into action. In a desperate bid for clarity, Salim stepped out onto the deck. The scene before him was in stark opposition to the bustling aircraft carrier he commanded just moments before. As he saw the telltale sign of devastation, the billowing smoke on the horizon, he turned to survey the Providence. The planes and their parts were dead. Hours went by as the crew struggled to make sense of what was happening. Confusion ruled in the absence of power and communication, and no one knew the origin or full depth of the disaster that had befallen them. Then, on the horizon, a glimmer of hope appeared. A rescue vessel, a submarine, cutting through the waves toward them. The evacuation itself was a solemn affair, with every crew member of the USS Providence having a broad look of gloom on their face throughout the somber departure. Salim approached a naval petty officer seeking answers. The young officer spoke in a barely audible whisper as he broke the news to Salim that sent shivers down his spine. Sydney has been hit, sir." Their device, it appeared, had indeed been no bluff. It had unleashed a wave of electromagnetic energy that rippled along the Earth's natural magnetic lines. Sydney, thousands of miles from the source, had been directly in the path of this unleashed force. In its destructive course, the pulse showed no mercy. Along with crippling Sydney's infrastructure, it intersected with a commercial airliner whose electronic systems fried in an instant, leading to the tragic loss of hundreds of lives. Salim's mind relentlessly replayed the pivotal moments aboard the USS Providence. Each second of indecision, every second of uncertainty, had triggered an avalanche of repercussions. The lives lost in Sydney, the passengers on the cruise ship, the deaths on the airliner, victims of technological failure, pacemaker-dependent hearts that stopped beating, hospitals in disarray, all weighed heavily on his heart. A burden of guilt and what-ifs that never seemed to lighten. Amidst all this self-loathing, Salim found himself jolting awake. A sharp tang of bile stung his throat, followed by a convulsive motion that ended in him vomiting beside his cryogenic pod. Sterile, cold, bitter bile odor and confounding alarm sounds assailed his senses. Blinking against the glaring lights, he fought to orient himself, his body tormented by the effects of cryosleep and his mind plagued by the remnants of his past. Commander Aya's irritating, high-pitched voice sliced through his mental fog, forcing him to rise and take in the reality he had been thrust back into. "General Salim, can you hear me? I need you, get up." Her voice was always insufferable and could be heard from any point on the ship, despite his efforts to drown it out with music. Normally a tranquil stasis chamber, the cryogenic chamber was now resonating with sirens and Aya's cries. Salim's eyes darted to the components of his pod that had been dismantled, an obvious indication that Aya had been laboriously trying to swap out his fuse. Something had gone terribly wrong. Gathering his will, Salim began the arduous process of regaining control over his body. For a man of his size and age, this was no minor feat. Usually it would take him around an hour and a half to gain full mobility, while well-trained astronauts could accomplish it in 45 minutes. Today, fueled by the pressing circumstances, he managed it in half that time, though his heart protested every movement. Sharpening his vision, Salim saw that both Chief Engineer Rashid and Cryogenics Engineer Dahlia were stirring in their pods, having experienced the same sudden reawakening. As Aya moved from pod to pod, trying to revive the rest of the crew by swapping fuses, he watched closely. Why had they all been put into stasis? He had no recollection of discussing such a plan with Aya, leading him to surmise that she had taken this drastic step on her own. In bitter reflection, he pondered, "Of course, what has she done this time?" And then he recalled the many times he had expressed his reservations about her to Mission Control. But the memory of his previous choices on board the USS Providence persisted, a sobering reminder of the dangers of making hasty judgments. With this in mind, he tempered his initial criticism. Aya approached him just as he was regaining his footing. "Good, you're up," she coldly stated, pressing a fuse, a screwdriver, and a wrench into his hands. "Revive Fahed and Nadia. Remember, align the fuse correctly, secure it, then initiate the pod's manual recovery sequence." Within an hour, he had revived them both, along with NASA. Rashid and Dahlia quickly joined his efforts, having shaken off the grogginess of their unexpected waking and started working systematically to change fuses and awaken other crew members. By the end of their frenzied endeavor, they had successfully revived 18 people. Nonetheless, a harsh truth eventually struck. 7 crew members had perished as their life support systems deteriorated beyond the crucial 120-minute window. Despite being a technological marvel, Cryogenics still bore the constraints of its nascent technology. Retraining was essential to avoid muscular atrophy and bone density loss, and the procedure had to be timed precisely such that stasis periods did not last more than a month. After feeling the identical pain creeping back into his chest, Salim deduced they must have been under for over 2 weeks, the longest he had endured since a 3-week stint that left a similar twinge of discomfort. The grim task of disposing of the bodies followed. Without the luxury of time or resources for proper funerals, the deceased was solemnly jettisoned into the void of space. Since he was unfamiliar with most of the crew, he gave it little thought. He had the luxury of not knowing anybody before the assignment, unlike everyone else. It was a long walk for Salim to the control room. Though it provided respite from weightlessness, the Carousel's revolving drum, which mimicked 70% of Earth's gravity, also made him aware of the body's present frailty, still in shock from the prolonged cryostasis. When he stepped into the control room, he saw the pilot, Tariq, and Commander Aya, hunched over a series of monitors, their faces furrowed with intense concentration. A disturbing image emerged from the array of screens. The Carousel had veered far from its original course, an uncharted trajectory laid bare in glowing lines and numbers. "Why are we off course?" Salim queried firmly, his eyes concentrated on the navigational data. Aya responded without shifting her focus away from the screens. "We've had a massive blackout, General. Initial reports point to an external, presumably solar anomaly that took our systems down, altering our trajectory. We're correcting course." Processing this, he pressed on. "Why haven't we dropped out of sublight speed to correct this?" She replied with a hint of condescension. "Dropping out of sublight isn't like hitting the brakes on a car, General. It's a 72-hour process. We're conserving our resources, making small adjustments to realign with our target." He felt like a naive brat for even suggesting it, but just as he was about to save face, an alarm broke the tension in the room, and then the ship's AI, a voice that had been silent thus far, started speaking through the various speakers across the room. "System diagnostics complete, functionality restored, detecting an unidentified object off our current trajectory." Relief washed over Aya and Tariq at the AI's reactivation, their expressions softening momentarily. "She's back," Tariq murmured, almost to himself. "It's not target 2058RH2, the AI clarified after a brief analysis, referring to the mysterious object it had been tracking. Instead, visual data began to stream in, images of a distant ship that the AI adjusted for the Doppler effect, correcting the color distortions caused by their immense speed. As the visuals clarified, a collective gasp filled the room. The silhouette of the Nun-Men Air, unmistakable and hauntingly familiar, emerged from the cosmic backdrop. "It's the Nun-Men Air," Aya muttered with a disbelieving tone. "The vessel appears to be in a stable orbit around our sun," the AI calculated. "At our current speed, we'll intersect the vessel in 28 hours. Salim quickly concluded, "We're on a collision course," and he wasn't going to second-guess himself this time. "Drop out of sublight, Aya. We must intercept." She gave a measured response in order to undermine him. "We'll overshoot. Changing our trajectory to prevent a collision is the best course of action for—" He cut her off before she could finish. "We can't just leave them stranded. They might have the resources and intelligence we need. Hit those damn brakes."